Doing well. Joe, you're a short timer.
I am a short timer.
Gosh.
I'm counting the days.
Man.
It's only one Saturday with early voting for the primary.
That's the schedule that the bipartisan board of elections officials put forward, and because it's the only bipartisan proposal we could get any agreement on, that's what we're going to go with. But primary elections are usually low voter turnout, so lines really are not something that we're concerned about.
There's a proposal on absentee voting request applications in the legislature right now that would basically, it would hinge on the legislature allocating money.
Yeah, Bill Coley's bill.
Yeah, do you like that proposal? What are your thoughts on that?
I tell you what I've said about it in the past, which remains the same, that the bill will do nothing to affect what we're doing now. We have the appropriations, there's nothing in the bill that will stand in the way of what we plan to do through this fall, so it will have no impact. But but we won't have any more money to do the mailings for the future. So at the end of the day, the legislature will have to appropriate money in the budget of every Secretary of State going forward. So we don't see anything in the law as being problematic, because we will need them to appropriate the money for us to do this in the future. So it does not cause a problem for our standard for the practices that we started in 2012 with absentee mailings.
But you indicated that you had a lot of people who used that avenue to vote in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not going to change that at all. The only thing that could change it is if the General Assembly does not appropriate money for it in the future. And I just don't see that. It's become so popular, I would find it highly unlikely that the General Assembly would ever stand in the way of continuing to do it.
Are most of the monies that are used for that, are they federal funds?
They're federal Help America Vote Act funds, which will be running out after this next round.
So you're setting uniform hours right now, but like you said, you would like the General Assembly to step in at some point and take care of this in the future?
Yeah, I believe that this issue is best left in the hands of a bipartisan vote by the General Assembly, so that we can put it in law and take it out of the hands of a single Secretary of State or local board members. This is an issue that I really believe it needs to be settled, needs to be put in law, and the General Assembly needs to come to a consensus, or at least a reasonable conclusion on this. But this group, the Ohio Associations of Elections Officials, it's made up of Democrats and Republicans. Many of the board members are Republican Party chairmen or women, or Democratic Party chairmen or women. And they, through this organization, recommended a bipartisan schedule for elections for the gubernatorial cycles and the presidential cycles. There's no reason that should not be the template for the General Assembly to put something in place and get bipartisan agreement on it. And we believe it's the place for them to start.
It's your intention then, if the General Assembly doesn't act, to kind of continue to use that as a template for your directives?
Well, I'm not going to speak to the future, but I'm going to tell you that there are a couple things. The General Assembly has the power to handle this issue once and for all. But if you look at previous court rulings, okay, the courts have said that they expect that we will keep uniform fair hours statewide, okay? So that's what the court ruling said. That's what we're going to try to do. We have a pending lawsuit settlement as it relates to the 2012 campaign with the Obama for America campaign, which we intend to work with them to come up with a schedule that everybody can live with. But it can be taken out of the hands of the courts. It can be taken out of the hands of the Secretary of State simply by the General Assembly acting. But in their absence of action, we have litigation and expectations from the court that we will set these hours, and we will do it in the absence of their leadership.
So do you have a pending settlement? What does that mean?
It means that we still have a lawsuit that needs to be settled from the 2012 election. Yeah, we've been working on it for quite a while.
And would it go into detail of the hours? The lawsuit deals with the last 3 days before the election. So we have multiple pieces of this, but the one thing that we will do
consistent with past court rulings and what I believe is good practice, is to set a uniform, fair set of hours that provides an adequate amount of time to vote, taking into consideration the financial limitations that these counties have, so that we can have a smooth, fair election in 2014 that people can have confidence in.
There are a few proposals dealing with election matters that are pending in the legislature, and yesterday at a House committee there were questions raised about why you had to come and testified on some of these proposals.
Well, many of the proposals are not things that I have been advocating for. The things that we have been advocating for are online voter registration, which still remains pending, setting uniform days and hours to settle some of the past litigation and some of the uncertainty about the election. Those are my priorities. I want the General Assembly to act on those priorities, and we have written them time and time again and talked to them in every venue about them acting on those proposals. Some of the other things that they're talking about, frankly, are not my priorities. It's a matter for the General Assembly. But if there are any members of the General Assembly who would like to talk with me about them, I served with most of them. I haven't received a call from any of them.
Gerberry had said he'd sent you a letter indicating that he would want testimony on some of the proposals that are before that.
I serve with Representative Gerberry. If you'd like to talk with me about it, I'm welcome. I'm welcome as phone call.
Why do you think it's taking the Ohio General Assembly so long to address your concerns? It's been a long time now since we've been talking about uniform hours, since before the 2013 general election.
You'd have to ask them.
The online voter registration proposal, that's something that when you took office you had talked about. It had been in one bill that did clear the legislature. And
yeah, they've already voted for it once.
So what, I guess, would be the concern, or what's the feedback that you're getting? What's the holdup there on that proposal?
I don't know. I will continue to work in good faith with the General Assembly to try to get this done. I have read some of the comments from the legislators about why they're not for it, and I have to say that they're misguided. This thing saves money. It makes it easier for people to register to vote. It makes elections more secure. In the General Assembly, and I blame either party because they're both to blame. We got an organization in here that we just spoke to where Democrats and Republicans who are local party chairs can get along and run elections at the local level, and the Republicans and the Democrats in the legislature need to get along and work through these things at the state level. We depend on their action to get this done. Online voter registration is not a partisan issue. We have a Democratic bill from Mike Stenziano, a Republican bill from Frank LaRose. There's support from groups on the left, groups on the right. Everybody's for it. And it makes sense to me that if you want to start with, if you want some bipartisan cooperation, let's start with that bill. We have bipartisan cooperation. Let's start with the schedule that this group came up with. That is bipartisan. So there's two things right there that there are bipartisan support for outside of the General Assembly, and we need to make sure we can build bipartisan support for them inside the General Assembly. And if they do those two things, then I think it might make it easier to move on to the more complicated issues.
Is there any way you could do an online voter registration without the General Assembly's approval?
I would. There are certain aspects of it that the cooperating agencies that we need to work with would need to have legislative authority to do. For example, we need the BMV to provide us the signatures that are on file with people's driver's licenses, so that we would have a signature on file to compare to a voter's signature when they sign up to vote. So we would need permission. BMV would need permission to give us that signature. That's an example of one of the components of the legislation that we need to get this done. And there's no reason that this should not be. Absolutely no reason that this should not be a proposal that can be done on a bipartisan basis. This should be something that the General Assembly can be proud of that they accomplished, and there's no reason for us to have to go around them.
To be clear, there's going to be 1 day of early voting for the primary.
No, there's 35 days.
Okay. There's
35
one
days.
Saturday.
One Saturday
8 to
from
12.
8 to 12,
8 to
the day,
12.
the Saturday before the election.
And the other 35 would...
And it will be open. And we're going to send the directive out, but the schedule has gone out now. We already sent it. Did we just send it?
Yeah, we're going to get it out.
We'll send it. You'll have it in writing, so you can know what to refer to.
And have you issued?
But
the directive?
but that came from this group.
The
You
hours,
saw.
the specific hours, and the
the
timeline?
schedule that we're setting comes from this group.
No evening hours.
Well, 8 to 5, and then the last day that you can register, the law requires you to be open until 9 o'clock, and so that I think it's a Tuesday. I think it's a Tuesday. The Tuesday that's the 30th day before the election, that they will be required to be open until 9 o'clock. And remember, you can get an absentee ballot and vote without ever leaving home. That's another way to do it.
And the standard hours for the 35 days, did you impose standard hours for each of those days?
Yes, 8 to 5.
8 to 5.
8 to 5.
Okay.